Hey WonderCon, my name is Heather Antos and I'm a senior editor here at Valiant Entertainment. And today I'm here to talk with you all about Shadowman, our upcoming horror series that we're super proud of, I'm so excited for, and I cannot wait for you guys to read it. It feels like it's been a year that we've been waiting for this thing. The first issue goes on sale April 28th, and I'm thrilled to be joined by our terrifying writer, Cullen Bunn, and our horrifying artist, Jon Davis-Hunt. How are you guys?
Good, thank you. Yeah, really good.
Awesome. Yeah, so I mean, let's get right to it. Let's talk Shadowman. This is super fun. Not often do we get to do a panel where it's the editor, talking with the team. So this is your time to dish and spill and tell me all about this book we're all working on together.
It's going to be the most polite panel ever when it comes to talking about editorial.
Editorial is the worst. No.
Right.
Well, yeah, I guess let's introduce everyone to who Shadowman is. What was your introduction to the character? When Cullen, when did you first hear about this character? What got you excited about him?
So I believe I was working in a comic shop when Shadowman first, like way back when Shadowman first appeared. So it was right at the, when Valiant, the in the old days, the Valiant books were coming out, and Shadowman was part of that. And that's when I first heard about him. It was exciting to me because I was always a fan of horror characters anyway. So it was cool to see, a new horror character, on the scene, I guess.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Jon, were you a fan of Valiant back in the day? Did you come about on Shadowman more recently? Like, what was your introduction?
Yeah, so I came to Shadowman because of the game back when I was at school. Basically, a friend of mine got an N64, and he only had 3 games. That was Mario. But then the other 2 were both then Valiant characters. So he had the Turok game and he had Shadowman. But Shadowman we played like loads. It was awesome. It was really, because it was at the time where up until then the only horror games were like Resident Evil. So Shadowman came along, so it was really cool. And then I didn't really start getting into Valiant comics until the relaunch, which would have been towards the late noughties, I guess. And then I got XO and Ninja. I always say Ninja. Is it Ninjak or is it Ninja K?
Ninjak.
Yeah. It is Ninja. Yeah.
It works.
Yeah. And then I read Andy Diggle's previous run, which was really cool. Yeah. So that was but in terms of his lore outside of that run and stuff that I can vaguely remember from the game, the rest of it's been a sort of a mystery, really.
Well, he is pretty mysterious, I would say. What I love about all of this is all 3 of us came to the character in a very, very different way. I myself, I was a mere baby when Valiant first came about. So I wasn't really introduced to the universe until the relaunch in 2012. And I remember I was at a show, just kind of walking along the floor. Valiant staff saw me looking at the books and they're like, "Oh, what are you into?" And I was like, "Oh, the more, messed up, scary, the better. Like, that's what I'm into." Cullen, Jon, I think, we're all kind of on the same page there. And it was like, "Oh, you like Shadowman?" And that was Shadowman. Quite literally, was my first ever Valiant book, and that was really? Yeah. And when I joined the team a couple of years ago, literally the first thing I asked was, "Who has Shadowman? I want to do Shadowman. I want a true horror book." And here we are. We're doing it.
It's mad. Yeah, it's mad.
You made it. You manifested that into the world.
I did. Yeah. So speaking of this horror book and what makes the Shadowman, in your guys' opinion, different, but yet the same to those previous iterations that, Cullen, you first stumbled upon in the 90s, and Jon, you with the video game. Like, What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, well, it was important for us. I wanted it to be, this isn't a reboot. I mean, this is a continuation of what we've seen before. The character's still, still the character, and the things that have happened since the relaunch. Those are all, in play in our story. But I think tonally and mood wise, this is unlike anything you've seen from Shadowman in the past. He's still a horror superhero, but we're really leaning into that horror element in a much bigger way, I think. And we're doing some very different kinds of horror stories with the book. I think the pacing of the book is different than what we've seen before from Shadowman, and really from most superhero books. And I think, and not to blow smoke for Jon, I think Jon's contribution here, it looks unlike Shadowman ever looked. I mean, it is when I get those pages and I see them, I'm always blown away. I'm always wowed by it. It will look unlike any book on the shelf, and it will definitely be unlike any Shadowman book you've read before. And that's not disparaging any of the other stuff. This is just such a different kind of approach to the character. And again, Jon, you have a knack for bringing those horror elements to life, man.
Oh, thanks, man. Well, I think again, to carry on the mutual patting each other's back. But I think one of the things that got me really excited about the project, in all seriousness, was your take and the way that it does have, a genuine horror slant to it, and not just horror in the sense of, there's plenty of gross monsters and stuff, which is always fun to draw. But I really like the more kind of macabre and more sort of not downer elements, but there's a real unsettling mood to some of the stories. And that's like my favorite horror stories, my favorite horror films certainly are things like The Thing and Aliens, and where stuff doesn't necessarily always go to plan at the end. And sometimes, one of my favorite horror films is the remake of The Mist, the one with and I like sometimes you don't get a happy ending, maybe not that giving any spoilers away, but
it's one of the most awful endings. Awful ending, the best possible way.
Yeah, and I think that's what I like. I like horror stories that stay with you, and I think especially after reading the first script that you did, which was great because it was kind of as you say, it's not a reboot of the character, it's a reintroduction to the character, and you get up to speed very fast, and it's got all the stuff you kind of want in there. It's got a monster, it's got an action sequence, but the way that the story kind of hits you right at the end and leaves you kind of feeling a little bit, is wicked, really cool. And it's great that, for me as an artist, one of the best things as well is when you said you wanted to set out to explore a wider world of horror, not just in terms of locations and environments, but the different beats, the different sort of subgenres of horror. That's awesome, because it's great for me. I get to play around with, lots of character stuff and different settings, and then also we sort of approach each mini story as okay, this is more an action orientated horror, this is more a kind of a suspenseful thriller, this is more a kind of a supernatural tale. So yeah, it's been brilliant. It's really, really good fun as an artist to play around with so many different things on a single book, which is really cool.
Yeah, Jon, you lead perfectly into the next thing I was going to talk about. Horror.
See,
look at you! Look at this dream team. Hey. Yeah. No, horror is a big genre, right? There's your slasher, there's your suspense, there's your monsters. There's a lot of different versions of horror out there, and I think when everyone says, "Oh, I love horror," something different pops into their heads, right?
Yeah.
And for me, both of you are creators who have worked in a lot of different realms of horror. So what makes this horror book different as opposed to, Cullen, your work on Empty Man or Harrow County, and Jon, your work on, some of your other stuff? What makes, how are you approaching horror in Shadowman either visually or from a written perspective that makes Shadowman special in this genre?
Well, for me, it's definitely, I mean, just what you said. I feel like every issue of Shadowman is kind of delving into a different subgenre of horror, and we're doing different kinds of stories. So one story may be very, monster heavy, and one might be, sort of almost a slasher story. I think, issue 3 has sort of some slasher elements to it, and then some issues are going to be a little more cerebral, a little more weird or surreal. But the interesting thing for me is, unlike a lot of supernatural superheroes that are out there in comics, first of all, he is a superhero, so we've got someone who can actually stand up to these things and is putting up is putting up an action-oriented fight against these things. But unlike a lot of heroes in that genre, he doesn't know everything. And I think to me, that's one of the most fun things about Shadowman is he's not, the expert on all of these things. He doesn't know them. As soon as he sees them, he may not know what he's dealing with. So we have a really nice point of view character and a window into that world, because we're experiencing these strange things right along with Jack. And he's, we're going to understand it through his eyes a little bit.
Yeah, I think also, like, it's cool that because of his power set as well, he's most times in horror comics, I think the hero, if it's a superhero, tends to be coming from like the magic side of things, tends to be like a magic user, so it ends up being spells against spells, or as Cullen said, someone who has a great understanding of what's going on. Whereas what's kind of cool with Jack and Shadowman is that he doesn't really know what's going on, and he's kind of going on a journey. And and also for me, 9 times out of 10, he does end up punching the monsters, which is great, right? Because it's like fun because it's great because you have loads of story, which is brilliant, and loads of lore, and I get to work on the acting. But it's nice to have a little, like, at the end of the day, he's going to punch the monsters, which is like really cool. But also like from my perspective, this was different. So the horror book I did before this, which was Clean Room, I purposefully tried to make it very bright and shiny and do all the horror kind of out, in the daytime, which was something I sort of discussed with Gail, when we were working on that together. Whereas with Shadowman, obviously, like the hints in the name, it is much darker. So I try to adapt my style more, obviously not just adding shadows in, but just adding a lot more detail into the backgrounds, the environment, so I can kind of play around with how he moves, particularly like in the first issue where you really get to we reintroduce his power set and how he can manipulate shadows and stuff. So that was really, really cool. Also, I think Cullen's done a great job of fleshing out the cast. So you have Jack, but then you've got, Baron Samedi, who's like awesome really good fun, because he's almost an inanimate object in the sense he's just a skull, but he's really expressive. He's kind of the comic foil. He's really sinister. He's this fine line between friend or foe. Is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? And so I had loads of fun just trying to make him emote through just hand gestures and playing around with shadows on his face and stuff. That was really cool. It's been a really fun book to draw, which you have a tendency as an artist to sort of say that when you're trying to support a book, but genuinely this has been one of the most fun series that I've got to draw. So it's
well, I can tell you that when they finally open up the Eisners to a category of Shadowman and Baron Samedi fighting and arguing, you will win hands down, because you draw the greatest arguments between those two characters.
Well, if there's an award for the most detailed costume work, then I definitely want to be up for that.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I was, John, you're teeing up my questions just like so perfect. Like, are you looking at my notes? What's going on here?
We're just in sync.
We're in the same page. Yeah. No, I mean, speaking of costumes, speaking of story, I want to dive in a little bit deeper about how we built this book, truly, Cullen, you and I go way back. We've been working together for quite a long time. but we, you know, and you and I both always knew and respected each other as mutual horror fans, but we never, you know, at our time at Marvel, we never got to work on a horror book together. And, you know, for me, when I knew I want to do a horror book, I want horror Shadowman, like you were it for me. You know, to me, no one does horror like Cullen Bunn. And if I recall correctly, you know, when I first reached out to you, I basically was like, Shadowman horror, what do you want to do? You know,
that was the initial. Yeah, it was kind of an interesting time, because I remember I messaged you on Twitter about something. I don't even think it was about Shadowman. And you responded and said, "Since I have you, let's talk about Shadowman," or something like that. And yeah, and then we, you know, what was really exciting about this is that we were able to build something and really take it and do something completely different and new with the approach to the character. And timing for the character itself was perfect, because he's gone through some major changes, and his relationship with his powers is different. So it was a perfect time to kind of reapproach things. But yeah, that was exciting for me, is that it was pretty much open for, we could do what we, you know, do something cool and different with this character. And yeah, there's some major story elements that came out of that, you know?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, is it, you know, because I don't know, I'm the editor, I'm the one who does the reaching out, you know, is that intimidating when an editor's like, do whatever you want? Do you prefer like a sandbox to play in? Like, what, you know, what, or does it matter on the character, the genre? Like, what's that experience like?
Well, I think it matters. It depends on the character and the publisher and the editor's willingness to be open to new ideas and doing things differently. I mean, because you know, we've all worked on projects in the past that it's very sort of regimented. This is what it's going to be. And that's fine. That's honestly, that's easy work, because you know exactly what you've got to do. But this is much more exciting and interesting to me, is what we were doing with Shadowman. So if I was going to say which one's more fulfilling, it's always more fulfilling to work on something where you've got that sandbox, like you said, where you can do all sorts of crazy things.
No, for sure. And John, for you, we didn't know each other. You know, we've never worked together.
No, I know. I sort of forget that, because it feels like, it feels like we've worked together before. It's weird.
It is. Yeah, no, I mean, I fell in love with your work originally on The Clean Room. That was, I think it was the first thing of yours I ever read. It's the first thing I knew was yours that I read, at least. And, you know, that series creeped me out, you know, like your art in particular. I mean, Gail obviously is a fantastic writer, but your work in particular, like, I was completely blown away with, you know, the clean open lines and how safe you feel, like you said, the bright colors. And then when it gets gritty, it gets scary,
and pretty dark.
Yeah. And I love that. I love horror that makes you feel safe and then pulls the rug out from under your pants. And you know, our relationship literally started, I think, me just reaching out, you know, via your website and being like, hey.
Yeah. It was so funny. Yeah, because it was weird. It was just dead weird. I was coming to the end of the Wildstorm, and previously to doing that, I'd always been very proactive about lining up new projects, and I was thinking, okay, I need to start doing that. And then weirdly, just before you contacted me, another couple of editors contacted me. I'd not kind of had that before. I'd always been the one that had been like, oh, I need to find some work. And then I was in a really fortunate position where not lots, but more than one person contacted me. So, yeah, it was great. But then after talking to you, like, you know, really quickly, we sort of hit it off, and then I read the script, and it was cool to do something that felt different to what I'd just done, which was the Wildstorm. And it was cool again to kind of, because I really love horror, but it was nice doing something that was different to what the Clean Room was. And I knew I could draw it in a different way, because that's kind of the thing I was looking for. I always want to kind of move from one project to another and try and not change the way I draw, but certainly step it up and maybe experiment with something new. So it just ticked like loads of boxes, and it was kind of cool because it felt a little bit like left field as well. There were some other things that I was looking at that were probably a bit more, similar to what the Wildstorm was, I guess. So it was kind of cool to go no, I'm going to do this, something completely different. So yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I fangirled in the office when you responded and said you would do it. So there you go. But so, your work as an artist, obviously one of the first things you did when we were working together is you took a look at the characters and you Jon Davis-Hunted them up. You did your design series, and they're phenomenal. Blew me away. Clearly right off the bat, you put ink to paper and said you're going to make this job as difficult for yourself as possible with some of those costumes.
Yeah, you did warn me several times.
Yeah. So what is that process like designing a horror book, designing a horror world? Can you talk a little bit about like what goes through your head in particular with Shadowman?
Yeah, so I actually work closely with my wife, who she's also a designer, you see. So we work on like most projects, the both of us at the design phase. She's great because she brings stuff to it because all my influences tend to be steeped in probably what everyone else my age, coming from a geek background, influences are, right? So, but she's great because she comes more from more like a fashion, like she has more of a fashion and like a music design interest. So we talk about stuff together. We spend a lot of time just thinking about like who the character is, where they would have come from, how their experiences prior to where the story starts might have influenced the way that they look, and by doing that, trying to think of things that are new that people haven't done with the character before. So with Shadowman, it was particularly because he comes from New Orleans and there's a musical influence. I looked at a lot of kind of musicians from that sort of area, and then going slightly further back in time, other sort of musical interests and musicians that might have influenced the sort of stuff that Jack might be into. So there's like jazz influences and obviously music from like the early 60s and stuff. So and then we throw it all into a pot, have a big brainstorm. I do loads of really quick thumbnails. But 9 times out of 10, by the time I get to the point where I draw the first character design, I kind of know what the character is going to look like. Like with Baron Samedi, as soon as I thought about dressing him a bit like Hendrix, basically, that was just like, that just felt right. Like I just felt that's how he should look. And then with Jack, again, I thought, well, he's he travels, so he's not going to wear, he's probably going to be a t-shirt and jeans guy, but they're going to be like practical jeans. But he's also going to have a kind of a cool kind of fashion sense to him. So yeah, it's sort of like mixing practical stuff with the stuff that's going to look good on the page, because you can't be too subtle, because then you just end up with like people just looking like, how I do every day, which is just jeans, t-shirt. So you just have to like add, and then you sort of like bling him up. And the most fun thing was taking Shadowman's actual form and getting to play with that, because I did want to, whenever you do an existing character, you kind of want to do something to him that makes it your own kind of spin. I always think a great like analogy is what McFarlane did way back when he took Spider-Man and he just changed the webs, and then once he did that, everyone did it that way. And I like the idea of like doing something that later on people draw it that way, and even if no one remembers where it originally came from, if there's some elements of the character that gets carried on that other artists take out, that's like really, really cool. So so I tried to tweak his costume slightly. And yeah, I think what we've got is a really kind of cool, like a refinement to what's gone before. And yeah, hopefully people will like it and they won't be like, oh, you've made it awful.
No, it's very classic. It's very modern, yes, it is. You could say it is just jeans and t-shirts and a jacket, right? But it is very intentionally that.
Yes.
And
totally.
It's you, and you can tell there's some intentionalism to that, and that Jack chose that for himself, which
that's what very
Sandy chose that jacket.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the thing where you know the inner geek in you really comes out, because you do, I literally sit there and I think, okay, what would he like? What would he actually like? What does he like? What would he put on in the morning? Like, what's he into? And you totally overthink the character. You know, you totally pretend that they're real and everything. And it's, you know, it's quite it's one of the cool bits of the job that it's very hard to explain to people that aren't into any of this stuff at all. Like, I have friends I have no interest in comics at all, and they ask what I do, and I go, yeah, well, I sit there, you know, and I draw, and like sometimes I imagine what that character's actually like in real life, and then I like, you know, and they're like, oh, do you weirdo? But it's cool, right? It's the type of thing that I think, like, people that are into comics, it's what makes, you know, it's the details that makes the stories so interesting and last for longer as well, I think. And it's fun when people do pick up on the little tiny, you know, details. Because sometimes I'm sat there and I'm drawing stuff, particularly with like all those buttons on Baron Samandi's coat, and I'm like, is this worth it? Heather told me this wouldn't be worth it, but at some point, if someone turns around and goes, "Oh man, that jacket is such a cool jacket," even if one person does that, I'll be like, yes.
There you go. No, everyone calls out Baron Samedi. So you know, and they haven't even seen the whole issue yet. So
I know.
So it's great.
And I managed it, and I kept him in that jacket for the whole arc as well.
You have.
He's gonna rip it off. He's gonna rip it off.
One issue where it's just like summer and he's really hot and he just like can
but then like one of those old-fashioned bathing suits with the stripes. Like,
that would be fantastic. I think he could pull it off as well. That's what's so cool about it. He could totally pull it off.
Oh my gosh. So we touched on this a little bit, but one of the very cool things that Cullen and I discussed very early in this process was the idea of exploring the deadside beyond New Orleans. In the previous runs, you know, Jack Boniface's home is New Orleans, and the deadside and the troubles they're in always seem to happen in New Orleans. But as we know, you know, the deadside can infect literally everywhere. And so every single issue is, you know, Shadowman interacting with these infections, as you will, in different locations across the globe. So I have a question for the two of you based on this. Say Shadowman gets a day off. Where in the world do you think he would go to have that day off?
Oh, so does that mean he's not going to somewhere where he won't encounter monsters, or somewhere where we'd like him to go to encounter a particular monster associated with that place?
Well, let's do both. Let's do where you think Jack would choose to vacation.
Okay.
You know, because he can go anywhere.
Right,
and
yes.
Where you would like to see him have to, encounter.
Well, can I go first, Cullen? Because then give you some. Because I think he'd clearly want to go to a music festival somewhere, right?
Right. Yeah.
So, and I'm trying to think of places where. So we've done the desert, so we can't go to Burning Man, and he can't go to Glastonbury because we've already done the UK. But there's this Icelandic festival up in like the Arctic Circle, which is like, I think it's one of these. I can't remember if it happens all through, like it's a day and it's just at night, or if it's a day and it's all day. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So we go to a music festival somewhere in Iceland, and then we do some kind of Yeti monster.
That would be
cool. It would be cool, right?
That would be cool.
But then his day off is ruined. His day off is completely ruined.
Yeah, I mean, I basically...
He doesn't get a day off. There's no days off when you're a superhero.
It's true.
We can listen to... There'd be a beer tent, and Baron would get absolutely wasted, and then Shadowman would just get attacked by Yetis. Although, actually, Yetis, technically, they're not from Iceland, are they? They're from like the Himalayas. So I'm completely messing up my... but you know what I mean.
An Arctic-based cold monster.
A woolly mammoth, big woolly mammoth monster.
Okay.
Yeah, because I've never drawn like an elephant or anything with a massive trunk or anything. That'd be cool.
Let me tell you guys this. I have, since long before I worked in comics professionally, I have been developing an idea about a woolly mammoth that gets frozen in the past because it had been possessed by the devil. And the woolly mammoth gets extracted and thawed out. And it's this devil-possessed woolly mammoth. Its name...
Great idea.
Hold on a second. Its name, Helephant.
Oh, that's amazing. So that's got to be in the next arc.
Right? I feel like that's just the villain from now on out. Forget everything we have planned.
Yeah.
Elephant from here on
amazing.
Let's redraw everything that we've done so far. Yes. No. All right, Cullen, your turn. Where would he go for his day off, and where would he run into trouble?
Well, I was not thinking he was going to run into trouble, but okay. I agree with John that he would go somewhere music related. So I was thinking if he stuck to the States, he'd go somewhere like Austin or maybe Memphis. Because, you know, he's got to get out of New Orleans a little bit on his vacation, right? But yeah, I think he would want to go somewhere very music heavy. And if he went somewhere, especially if he like goes to Memphis, it might be cool if he met like, it's not necessarily a Memphis thing, but it's kind of Southern. If he met like some sort of crossroads demon that he can get a musical adventure with.
So we take him to Atlanta. The devil went down to Georgia.
And Atlanta could work. Yeah, and he has the silver fiddle and everything, and they have a musical duel.
There you go. Sax versus fiddle. I like it a lot. That sounds.
And the Baron on drums. He's just taking he takes his own ball. And as they become a band, and as they are celebrating and playing music, guess what happens? Helephant. There he is.
Oh, amazing.
Blowing his trumpet, right? Blowing his horn.
That's right. That's right.
Oh man.
I feel like Helephant would be one of those villains that people would want to reform and become a good guy, and then the Valiant universe just has Helephant as their star character from here on out.
That is a very interesting choice. Yeah, we can talk about that offline.
I really want to pitch it right here. I want to really.
It's definitely a miniseries.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, fun and games aside, want to steer back to the book real quick. They're not here with us today, but Jordi Belair, Clayton Coles, are lovely colorists and letter on this book. Two of the best in the business.
Absolutely.
At what they do. I just want to give them a spotlight real quick. Jordi and Clayton both have been working with my entire career. Both are hardcore horror fans as well. I worked with Jordi on her creator-owned series, Redlands, at Image, another great horror book. Check it out. Jordi also colored Dr. Mirage, who plays with the Deadside, with Shadowman a little bit earlier. That came out a couple years ago. So definitely check that out. I mean, John, Cullen, what do you guys think of these two? They're not here, so you can be honest.
Sorry, Cullen. After you.
No, go ahead, John.
So, I mean, because obviously from this must be similar for you, Cullen. You write the script, and then once you've written it, you're trusting someone to, draw it right, for want of better words. And so, like, it's the same thing. Once I've finished kind of just doing the line work, like the colors and the letters are so important, because they massively affect the way that the art looks. They massively affect the way that the art flows. I hadn't realized before I started making comics or getting involved in comics how important all that stuff is. So, I mean, I definitely feel like the sort of minnow on this book, because to have like, Jordi and Clay, they've had illustrious careers well beyond what I've been used to. So I was just thrilled when we managed to get a hold of them, because I know Heather, you said to me, who would you like to be the colorist? And I almost said Jordi, because I knew that you'd work with her, but I had asked for Jordi to color my work, I think, on every book prior to this one that I worked on. So I was like, I'm not going to buy that because it's not going to happen. And then you were like, oh, Jordan's going to do it. I was like, yes, finally. That's amazing. So yeah, and it looks incredible. I mean, it looks incredible. I mean, she covers up a lot of mistakes I've made. She makes stuff I've done that looks better. So yeah, I'm super thrilled. She's such a brilliant artist.
Yeah, and I've worked with both of them. I mean, again, much like you, going back to my early days of my professional career in comics, I've worked with both of them. And yeah, I think they make the job look easy, and that means people overlook it a lot of times because it looks so smooth and seamless. It can seem like it's easy, and it's not. When you talk about the colors, I mean, there's a lot of stuff we do in this book that the colors heavily influence scene changes, setting changes, tone changes. That the colors are so important to that happening. And there's a lot of stuff in the look. There is. I don't feel like it's an overwritten book at all, but when it comes to letters, it's just the simple act of knowing where to put those captions and how to put those balloons out there and make that scene flow. That takes skill, and that's a great letterer makes it look simple. But this book is definitely sort of, in my opinion, sort of a comedy of riches when it comes to that. We've just gotten, I mean, it's such a great team from the, if you take me out of the equation, it's such a great team.
No. I mean, I say it all the time in office, like this book is one of my favorite books I've ever worked on so many different levels. One, it hits that horror niche I've just, always wanted to do with all of my favorite creators. I get to work with some of my favorite people in this business, and you guys are all an editor's dream. You're very easy and fantastic at what you do. So,
thanks, but also like you've been a brilliant editor, a really brilliant editor to work with, especially from my point of view, because I'm still fairly new to all this. This is only my 4th book. So I'm still very much at a point where, like, could people please tell me what I need to be doing? Because sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I'm doing it right. So it's great to like get so many tips and advice and how to improve. So it's been brilliant. It has felt like a really genuine collaborative kind of piece of work, which I think is what's really great and unique about working in comics. I used to work in video games before this, which is great. I had some brilliant times, met some great people, but I know what it's like to work on a project where your creative your creativity is lost amidst so many other people and over projects that take a tremendous amount of time. One of the great things about comics is it's relatively fast with a very small amount of people. You all have a huge amount of input, and you're fortunate enough, on a project like this, for your input to actually find its way into the final project. It's brilliant. It's been absolutely awesome.
Awesome.
You guys rock.
Thank you. All right. So another situation. The deadside has infected the world. You're in a comic shop. You can only grab one comic before you're taken over by the deadside. Why is that comic Shadowman #1?
You got to think of it as a survival guide, right? If the deadside is starting to bleed into the world, you better grab the one book that's going to give you even a hint of how to survive from one moment to the next. But here's the thing. You're going to have to come back the next month because the deadside is always surprising you. So you've got to get another copy next month to see if there's any more clues. You just got to make sure get back to the comic shop every time the deadside invades the world. It's very important.
I love it. Well, April's a great month for Shadowman. Shadowman #1 is on sale April 28th, but it's not the only Shadowman content that is coming out this April. The Shadowman remastered video game will be available via Night Dive Studios this April. That's right, John. That is that Shadowman
Is that
game.
video coming out this April? That's awesome.
Yeah. That
is
the
awesome.
game that introduced you to the character.
Yeah.
I've got to get a little sneak peek of it myself. It's super fun and awesome. I can't wait until I can play it for real. And I would be remiss to not mention there's some other possible Shadowman stuff in the works that I can't say any more about, but you'll have to pay attention.
Can you tell us? Can you tell us like later?
Sure. Absolutely.
I'm super excited.
Sorry to the rest of everyone. But yes, Shadowman #1, the best horror book you haven't read yet, but will on April 28th. Written by Cullen Bunn, drawn by Jon Davis-Hunt. Cullen, John, tell everyone out there where they can get a hold of you, see more of your stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so mine's easy. It's across social media. It's Cullen Bunn. I'm most active on Twitter. So if you want to talk Shadowman when the book comes out and you want to talk about it, or you just want to tell me how excited you are about it, or you want me to tease you about Shadowman, or whatever we want to talk about, Twitter's a great place to reach out to me. My website's cullenbunn.com, but I'm pretty easy to find.
You also have a newsletter too.
I do, which you can get to from my website. My newsletter, I'm always spilling the beans on all sorts of cool stuff on the newsletter. So there you go.
Awesome. And John,
I'm exactly the same as Cullen. Well, I say exactly the same. It's like Cullen, but I'm far lazier. So I'm just about on Twitter. I'm just like hanging on Twitter. But I always intend to post more stuff. But
you're too busy drawing Shadowman.
Yeah, exactly. I'm too busy. Too busy drawing those bloody buttons.
Draw fewer buttons, and you could actually be on social media a little more.
Yeah, exactly. I must have drawn literally thousands of those things by now. But no, if people feel free to message me on Twitter, and especially once the book comes out, I always try and get you get super excited, don't you? I mean, I'm really excited now. It's still 2 months away. Feel free to, and I have a website as well. But again, it's not been updated in a long time. But people can message me through that as well if they so wish.
It's just buttons. It's just like pictures
That's
of
all
buttons.
I do know is draw buttons and lace and frills.
I know what I'm getting you for your Shadowman Day. I'm just gonna get you that jacket. I'm not even gonna get you that. Get you the buttons and a jacket separately, and you can put it on yourself. You guys heard it here. I'm Heather Antos. That's Cullen Bunn, Jon Davis-Hunt. Shadowman #1 on sale April 28th from Valiant Comics. You can check out more at Valiant Comics at Twitter, or go to our website at www.valiantentertainment.com. And I cannot wait to hear what you think about Shadowman.